This podcast is being recorded.
Hi, my name is Pat Hammond, and I am the director of the New Hampshire Business Guild. As Guild director, I've spoken with many business owners this past week who are struggling to find the information they need to keep the doors open and stay productive and profitable with a remote workforce. With the hope of helping businesses connect with the information they're looking for to get their companies and employees through this crisis, I've partnered with Cynthia Kalina-Kaminsky, a leading business strategist and supply chain expert from Process Strategy Solutions, to record a series of quick videos to connect you to the tools and information you need to keep your business up and running through this crisis. The fact is, we're in unprecedented territory, and everyone is feeling a little stressed and crazy. Very few companies give serious consideration of how they will respond to a global pandemic. And unlike natural disasters, war, or terrorism, which are limited to regional or local settings, COVID-19 has shut down entire countries, businesses, and supply chains while nations try to contain the virus. Even worse, there is no designated endpoint. Most governments seem to be advocating a 2-week shutdown of non-essential services with the order for citizens to adopt social distancing and sheltering in place. But the news seems to be filled with warnings that this could go on for several weeks or even months, which brings us to the question of how do you run a business when all your workers are in different locations? And how do you stay on top of changing government mandates for public safety? And finally, how do you afford to make these changes when your productions come to a halt? Cynthia is going to be sharing her insights to help you find the resources that will help you focus and regroup so that you can hit your targets and continue providing the vital services your customers need.
Well, Pat, you're exactly right. It's like a maze out there, not because people in business aren't capable of handling it, but because everything's changing for them. In fact, we went into this COVID-19 with things already in gigantic flux, all the new technologies, all the new ways of doing business, all the new ways of competing in the world. And now on top of it, we have different requirements from different states within the US. We have people having to work in different ways. We have business models being created on the fly. How in the world do you know how to conduct a business, and what are other people doing, and how in the world can we straighten out this tangle? Well, that's what we're here to do. And today we are going to talk, just like as Pat had mentioned, about some of the resources that are available to you. And we're going to be putting handouts with even more resources at aligningstrategy.com for you to go in and download whenever. We are in a disaster type of a state, but disaster relief doesn't just happen. The money just doesn't flow. When you hear states saying they're going to declare that the state is in a state of emergency, lots of states there, it means that formally they are saying they need help. And that allows them then to apply for various government help. The SBA Disaster Relief Help being one. This is a low interest loan, and it's given to small businesses. Now, that doesn't mean small in terms of what the stock market says is small. It means small in terms of SBA, and you'll need to go onto their site, sba.gov, and look to see if your size, the number of employees you have, as well as the amount of revenue you bring in for the industry that you're in, if it meets the criteria. If so, once the state is declared a disaster area and approved by SBA as such, then the money starts flowing through and you can apply as a business. But you don't go direct usually to the SBA because that's just one entity. The great thing is we do have 50 states and they're able to help with their information so that they can get you the information of where you actually go to start that application process faster. All states have COVID-19 resources. I went through all 50 states plus Washington, D.C. last night, and we captured that in one of our two handouts. One has the disaster relief, and we've given examples. The state of New Hampshire has a comprehensive set of assistance for businesses that combined with the federal assistance helps. You can find it on the state site. and every state has its own site with its own combination right now of health information as well as then what businesses need to know, what orders are being released that start to direct the state in how to move money where. Every state is a little different. Every state is at a different place in dealing with the COVID-19, so you won't find all of the sites exactly the same. And the reason why I'm mentioning this and the reason why you want to make sure that you understand the state or different states, not just the one that you live in, is because if you have a remote team, the state's requirements may vary based on where the team member is. And you'll know that based on what the state of wherever you're living, is actually putting out. The websites, you'll either scroll down to where it says business or workers and employees and employers, or it goes straight to a business site where you can start to see things such as, how does this affect my business insurance? What do I have to do as far as some of the employment pieces go? Where do I send my employees if I have to lay them off? Do I have to lay them off? Has the definition of a layoff changed? If I'm a business owner, can I go in and get funding for being unemployed? Because typically you cannot, but yet as we're seeing across the country, the requirements are being relaxed so that help is given where it's needed. And you just need to go in and find that on a state-by-state basis. But even that only gets you the structural foundation as we're going. There are some very interesting things that you can do without waiting. And that is that you can think through things. I've got training up here as an example, but think through them in a different lens. Remember that a lot was changing before, and a lot more is changing now. And you're having to figure out how to work in a different type of structure. Some of you have never had to work off site before, have never had to do as much remote teaming, or others have teams that are on site and others that are off site, and you have a counterpart on site who, let's say that if you have to have lab work done, you can call in and say, I need this uh, cabling moved to this location. I need you to switch on these switches. And that way everything gets done. So unique ways of running your business. But you'll find that as you go through this, because as Pat alluded to, this is probably going to take a lot longer than anyone understands because it's going to come in waves as we're now told. So as the first people get better and restrictions start to loosen up, COVID-19 didn't go away, and that means the second wave will come in. And we don't know what that will look like, if it will be shut down as it is right now, but if it is, you can go into either a state resource, which is funded by the state taxpayers, or you can get money from the federal government, usually distributed through a state entity, such as a community college, to get your training dollars, which sometimes cover up to 100% of the training you need. So you can become more efficient, more optimized in what you're doing. We're going to go through tips, tricks, techniques, and different models in this series of podcasts. But there is other more formal training that you can also reach in and get to. This allows you not only to train for what you need right now, but you can start looking forward into what does it mean once COVID-19 is gone? How can we now adjust our business for both plan A, which is what we used to do, and plan B, which is what we now do? Because we're trained and we're fully capable and we can stand it up quickly. What is it that we need to have to move people ahead in their career to be able to have the different opportunities make sense for a new way that we're doing business? And I want to pause here. Pat, are there any questions that I can answer as I went through these?
Well, I did have a couple questions. One of the things that members have brought up in the last week is that here in New Hampshire, not every county qualified at that time. This was as of Wednesday or Thursday.
Mhm.
Not every county qualified for some of these disaster relief loans. especially here in the southern part of the state where we're much more populated, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense to people because we're the ones that are sheltering in place.
Mhm.
Um, has this changed, and do you foresee this changing in the near future?
Yes, it's changing daily. At the SBA site, and one of the handouts does have a link so you can go in and see state by state which states as a whole have been declared disaster areas. And that depends on the state submitting those forms we talked about to the SBA, and the SBA being able to work through them and get them into the disaster uh, areas, the certified disaster areas, so that they can move the money in. New Hampshire as a whole state is now in it, and you'll see that there are then counties in Vermont that are close to New Hampshire and therefore have some adjacencies to them.
Yeah.
Vermont may be, and as I said, this is changing on a daily basis, minute by minute, may now be declared a fully state disaster area, or it may still be in the queue, and you just need to watch.
My other question was, do you see this, in your role as a business strategist, do you see this as an opportunity for businesses of all sizes to rethink their business model as far as how they run operations, who does what, and will we be taking some of these strategies that we're learning on the fly right now? Will we be taking them and adopting them to our new business model going forward?
In part, that depends on the type of business you're in. A manufacturing assembler can't just assemble things at home and then ship it to the next person's home. You are going to have people gather together to be able to manufacture a product. You are going to have to run a service entity that sells to people the food that they're ordering, or something else. So there are certain industries that are going to run parts of their business what seems to be the same way. And yet, at the same time, just like that example I said before, where there were design engineers who have split into two teams, and one team is on site, one team is off site. And if you don't have to be on site, you can be off site. But you've got a counterpart who's responsible for that week or two, who is going to be the person on call to go and do the hookups or the changes that are needed, and you continue rolling because we do have access digitally to most systems that we've got. So instead of just digital conversion, we're actually now looking at that digital transformation, excuse me, that many companies have been talking about, and yet we haven't quite known how to handle. Well, this is the beginning of it. And so there is great opportunity here.
Yeah, I see it. I mean, I'm a glass is half full kind of person anyway, but I do see it as an opportunity to let go of some of the old paradigms. That's the way we've always done it, kind of mentality, and embrace more agile systems going forward. My other question is, do you see this as a wake up call for businesses? I'd say the beginning of February, end of January, beginning of February, I hosted a, a planning session with guild members who were interested in trying to plan because we could see it. We could see with supply chain shutting down and the markets being affected, and we could see there was a potential of future issues for spreading the disease, that we had the strategy session where we brainstormed ways that our local small businesses would anticipate how these things would affect them. And we had a very low turnout because most people just didn't think it could ever happen. Do you see risk management changing because of this?
Absolutely. The first thing that changed a few years back was the fact that strategy came to the forefront. You now must have a performance strategy so that everyone's aligned, because the speed at which business is being done is very fast. You don't have time for 38 different meetings. With COVID-19 and the fact that we're working differently, you have to have a very well enunciated strategy, and that risk management plan has to support the strategy and tell you what that plan B is going to be. So for example, I work a lot with manufacturing, and a lot of times The risk management plan would be, well, we've got a strategic risk management plan to find new sources of supply in case there's a weather event in this part of the world. Well, as we can see, we can't think of things as weather events, but also that's a functional area. That is strategic for that functional area, but we've got to think larger. We've got to think risk for the business. What is it that could force us to change the way we do our business? And what does that model have to look like? And then how do we train it in and how do we make sure we're still delivering to the customers in the way we need to? What are all the ins and outs that we have to think of up front? And right now we're thinking of behind the eight ball.
So I think you alluded to this earlier. What are the training options? I think there was money that is available for companies to do training going forward.
There is. So what happens is that states have funding grants that the taxpayers of the state have generously said, yes, let's put money into this. And a lot of times it's called workforce development. And so you can get various training skills that are already approved brought into your group. How you apply to that is based on the state requirements. So it varies state by state. You also have federal money that comes into the state in various ways. I had mentioned through a community college. This was expanded quite a bit under the Obama administration, where the community colleges were the agents for the grants. They had to do all the administrative pieces. You would go and let them know that you needed this type of training over the next 3 months or the next 12 months. You had a plan for elevating the skill sets of your employees. And they would then package that up and go get the approval. But that takes about 90 days if you're going in piece by piece with a larger conglomeration of businesses, such as what's happening with the community colleges. I don't know how they're running them today. They may be going smaller packages so they can get them through faster. But it was taking a good 90 days to get approval. But that's okay because you've got all of these pieces right now to start working through and getting running so that your people are open to be able to handle one new thing, which would be the training. For instance, if I were to say what was the most important thing that you needed to do right now with your teams as you're starting to set this up, it would be to communicate. Make sure that you understand what everyone else is dealing with. Some people have children at home, some people have elder care they have to do, and now that they don't work in a work location, that is right there with them all the time. So as you're going through and communicating, you're trying to figure out what is the schedule that we need to be on? When must we meet? And how can I set up various ways for smaller teams to meet throughout the day as it works and they figure out their schedules, coordinate to get the smaller project pieces done so that we can meet as a larger group to make sure that we're continually moving forward. We're getting those deliverables done. How needs to be communicated quite effectively, which means, again, we go back to that very basic, let's get the communications going first, making sure that everyone understands when they're supposed to be where so that can happen effectively. We'll be talking more about this later, and we'll be going into a lot of other pieces of remote working as well as tool sets that you can use in other podcasts. What I do want to invite you to is that Pat and I have teamed up together for either a 20 or a 45-minute consulting session where we help you get unstuck because now is not the time to be stuck. We want you to continue moving forward as rapidly as you need to. The 20-minute being something smaller, a quick problem that we can get to and get out of with you online. We'll be going into a Zoom environment or a 45-minute where we go into more detail. There are probably more issues involved, and it just takes a little longer to tease it out. But with both Pat and I there, we can look at it from different viewpoints and give you a very rapid consult from two different vantage points that usually would take quite a bit longer. That sign up is also at aligningstrategy.com, and you can go in and access our calendar from there. As I said before, the handouts and the recordings of these podcasts will also be there. So this is our go-to site for everything to get you through the COVID-19 session here.
Thank you for attending the first installment of our Keeping Your Business Healthy series. As Cynthia said, handouts and other videos in the series can be found at aligningstrategy.com. To connect with Cynthia about business strategy and supply chain solutions, you can reach her at success@processstrategysolutions.com. And to connect with me about New Hampshire specific issues or for help with technology, marketing, or communications, I can be reached at success@newhampshirebusinessguild.com. Once again, thank you for joining us. Watch for our next video. The topic will be case studies of how businesses are responding to the crisis and what you need to think about to adopt some of their strategies.